changing. Faster than anyone imagined, BRICS nations are plotting a new financial order.
Kills everything the dollar represents.
America's debt is soaring past $37 trillion. And now the threat is greater than ever. China is aggressively working to dethrone the U.S. dollar. They're striking deals in their own currency, building alliances with Russia and others, and quickly undermining the system that keeps the dollar strong. If the dollar loses its global status, your retirement accounts, your savings, and the value of your paycheck could vanish overnight. The cost of living would skyrocket. Loans would dry up. The economy would crash.
The country will go bankrupt.
The Rio Reset starts right now.
Hello and welcome to this Real America's Voice special event, BRICS 2025, the Rio Reset. I'm Eric Bolling. Welcome. Over the next hour, we're going to be talking about dollars and common sense and how you can stay ahead of the curve in these financially turbulent times. BRICS is holding their 2025 summit July 6th and 7th in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and it could be a game changer on many levels. But I bet many of you at home are wondering what BRICS 2025 is and if you should care about it. It's a good question that begs a solid answer. This year's summit could be a game changer that might potentially redraw the global economic map and trigger the fall of Western-led institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and the U.S. dollar itself. It is indeed the Rio Reset. Join us now with more insight into BRICS 2025 and the Rio Reset. I'm joined by Philip Patrick, the in-house economist at Steve Bannon's War Room and precious metals specialist from the Birch Gold Group. Welcome to you, my friend. So very, very important. We can talk about what BRICS is first. Why don't we just start with that? Let's tell the folks what BRICS is and why it is such an important event happening in July.
Of course. So thanks for having me, by the way, Eric. BRICS are a collection of companies. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So a collection of nations that are teaming up. Of course, no single nation can rival the U.S. This group of countries has become now the only legitimate geopolitical economic rival to the West and to the United States. They have currently half the world's population, about half the world's natural resources, and of course, nuclear weapons. These countries focus heavily on production rather than consumption, and for that reason, they're not suffering from debt burdens like most of the West at the moment. They also tend to be top-down autocratic states as opposed to democracies with principles like liberty and freedom that we value here in the West. And they have the advantage of making 100-year plans versus the 4-year election cycles that we have here in the United States. In essence, they are the only credible rival to the post-World War II global political and economic order, and they are gathering steam at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And their sheer volume, BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but it goes beyond those, right? There are other countries who want to get involved in it. And what is the express purpose for this huge conglomeration of countries, specifically to target the U.S.?
It's exactly that. They're looking at U.S. dollar hegemony. You're correct. The BRICS are gathering steam. Nigeria have joined, Indonesia have joined, 20 other nations now clambering to sign up, ultimately to move away from dollar trade. Officially, this is just a working session about economic cooperation, this meeting. Unofficially, they're expected to announce major advancements in their shadow financial system, essentially a 21st century alternative to the existing dollar-denominated system. Insiders are hinting at a coordinated push to link the various systems that BRICS have been developing over the last decade, things like Bridge and BRICS with the goal ultimately of making a dollar-free international system. They're looking to make non-dollar international transactions possible at scale. And ultimately, this meeting is a culmination of their ongoing project to end the dollar's monopoly, as I mentioned, as global reserve, and more importantly, to insulate their economies from American financial sanctions, essentially removing the most powerful non-kinetic weapon from our arsenal.
So it's a credible rivalry that they're interested in. So today, tell us, what is this Rio reset specifically about? What do they really want to do here? And do they publish it? And are they telegraphing to us what they're really all about? Because I'm concerned about what you just said. If they somehow gather to find an alternate currency besides the US dollar, boy, that would really undermine the dollar, and we'll talk about the effects of that down the road. But is it only about the dollar, or are they framing this in something else?
Look, they're looking to reduce our influence on a global scale ultimately, and this isn't hyperbole. Whether they lead with an official announcement, probably not. They're as much as possible looking to do this under the radar. I don't think an official announcement benefits the BRICS. However, the move in this direction is to reduce the dollar's potency on an international level. And this isn't just hyperbole. They're creating institutions, as you mentioned, a rival to the World Bank, rival credit rating agencies, and physical systems, right? They've got thousands of miles of undersea cables to move away from the Western-dominated financial system. So this is happening. It's been created. The more transactions that go through, the more the dollar's position as global reserve currency is under threat. But this is happening today. The cables are there, the systems are there, the institutions are there. It is happening.
And this is really important. This question is very important. The relevance. What does it matter if this group of nations start their own, financial system, their own currency? Tell us how it would matter to the folks watching right now.
Yeah, it's a great question, probably the most important one. Look, global reserve currency gives us what we call in the US exorbitant privilege, right? It has allowed cheap borrowing thanks to global demand for our currency, massive control over global financial flows. In essence, the US today has veto power over any nation's ability to engage in international trade. Global reserve currency status has allowed the federal government to amass huge amounts of debt without facing immediate collapse. It's enabled American capital markets to dominate the globe. It's ultimately made us the wealthiest nation in world history. It's hard to overstate how important global reserve currency status is. The dollar is a currency, but it's also our most potent weapon. Losing that status ultimately would mean, I think, persistently higher inflation, a massively weaker economy, and an end of our ability to call the shots, to project power worldwide. And I think that's a big part of what the Rio Reset is about. It's to hamstring us on the international stage.
You know, it's very important, the ripple effect of pulling the dollar as the reserve currency for the world. As it is right now, you buy oil or gold or any commodity really in international trade, you have to use dollars. So if you're in a country that isn't dollar-based, you have to buy the dollar, which gives us support to the dollar. If you remove that, tell us what else would affect a weaker dollar, because there's no demand for dollars worldwide if they use a different currency.
Yeah, look, it has a huge effect. Like you said, look, the more dollars that are used, the more demand there is for the dollar. Ultimately, the stronger the dollar becomes. Every single transaction that happens away from the dollar reduces the potency of the dollar and ultimately leads to inflation here in the United States. The effect of losing that would be significant, and people have to understand, no nation holds this status indefinitely. It is always sort of circulated throughout history. It was Great Britain before the United States. The average length one nation holds reserve currency status is 90 to 100 years. We've had it over 90 years here in the United States. So even in the context of history, our time is coming to an end.
Indeed, Philip, stay right there. We want to explore this further because very, very important. This things going on with the Rio reset. Again, it'll affect every single person watching right now. So, folks, learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold, the Birch Gold Group, can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting the word America to 989898. Plus, for a limited time, when you text America to 989898, you can get Birch Gold's exclusive Rio Reset fact sheet with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers. Let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no obligation info kit and a Rio Reset fact sheet before the July summit. Text America to 989898 today. Now keep listening to hear about the Rio Reset. We got a lot more coming up. The upcoming event poised to turn the global financial system upside down. A lot more just ahead.
We'll be right back with more Rio Reset right here on Real America's Voice. Welcome back to the Rio Reset, brought to you by the Birch Gold Group, right here on Real America's Voice.
Welcome back to this Real America's Voice special BRICS 2025, the Rio Reset. I'm Eric Bowling. For you at home, the BRICS Alliance, the only credible geopolitical rival to the U.S., has a plan to hijack the global financial system. The Rio Reset is happening July 6th and 7th in Rio de Janeiro, and it may be the end of the world economic order as we know it. Join me once again, Philip Patrick, in-house economist at Steve Bannon's War Room and precious metals specialist from Birch Gold Group. Philip, before the break, we were discussing the upcoming BRICS conference, the Rio Reset, and what it means for us here in the United States. Let's bring everyone up to speed. In essence, the Rio Reset is a coordinated and calculated scheme to hijack the global financial system right out from under the United States. Sounds like Jason Bourne stuff. Do power plays like this really make a difference in our lives? Will they be able to pull this off?
Look, time will tell, right? This is big. It is global in scale. What this means, I think, for the global economy is no more sanctions, no more weaponizations, no more soft power or the ability to influence other nations. More importantly, I think it means an end of constant demand for U.S. debt. We have to remember the effect that this has on our daily lives, right? Brazilian pension funds, they financed our homes, right? They bought the mortgages. We're talking about a world where that won't happen anymore, where mortgages become more expensive, right? Chinese investors fund credit card purchases, right? Because U.S. debt has been a popular investment for foreign investors. When that demand vanishes, borrowing becomes more costly, it becomes more expensive. The only reason, I think, largely we have the highest standard of living in global history is that for a long time, somebody else has been picking up the check. My concern is that in absence of that demand, our standard of living will decline over time. As I said before, we cannot overstate the importance of global reserve currency status. That position is under threat. We haven't lost it, but it is under threat, and it is very important that we try and protect it.
You know, through inflation and government spending, the value of the dollar naturally weakens anyway. So if you pull the demand for the dollar by international countries and corporations to buy and sell goods, it would further erode. And I'll just give you a quick example. The dollar's always been on a slide. The trajectory has always been lower. I have these gold coins. If you take the shot from up here, I have these gold coins on the desk. I've been buying these gold coins. My first purchase, here's a receipt in 1991 for $382 for this ounce of gold. It's now in excess of $3,400. It's crazy because the dollar has had a weaker and weaker demise over the 20, 30 years. That will continue. But this Rio Reset could be an exacerbation of that dollar demise. About right?
That's exactly it. And you're correct as well. People forget the currency loses value day on day on day through inflation, through devaluation. Purchasing power reduces over time. And the idea with gold, as you know well, you've been buying it longer than me, gold keeps pace with the cost of living. As inflation rises, it goes up and it preserves buying power. As you also rightly mentioned, things like the Rio Reset, a coordinated attack on global dollar demand at a time where we're fragile, that exacerbates and it escalates. And we're starting to see it already. The dollar's lost 21% of its purchasing power just since the pandemic, which was 5 years ago. And what we're talking about, and again, you used the correct word, it's about incentives for the world to use the dollar. And we've been disincentivizing them through devaluation, through weaponization. We've been creating an argument for many countries around the world to move away from the dollar. It's the same reason that Biden's weaponization of the dollar against Russia by seizing essentially their sovereign wealth fund, it led to a 5-fold increase in gold buying by central banks. It highlighted the weakness, and ultimately that's all it takes.
And we need to point out to the folks, it really doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat in office. The politicians like to overspend, and we add trillions upon trillions of dollars to our deficit each cycle, each election cycle, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, and that itself will be a support. It'll be wind in the sails of a gold price and a gold bar. And here's a gold bar. It'll be wind in the sails of a gold bar or a gold coin or any gold investment.
It's exactly right. And it puts wind in the sails of the BRICS and their plans, right? Because ultimately, the bigger our budget deficits, the larger our debt will be, right? And ultimately, the less attractive the dollar will be to foreign investors. That's why it appears to be the number one goal of the administration to try and close that gap and plug the deficit. So that's going to be key. Ultimately, we're going to have to incentivize the world to want to use the dollar again, and that's going to come with carrots ultimately and not sticks. It'll come in the form of a stable US dollar. In absence of that, gold is going to be the only solution.
Yeah, in the absence of that, we should be balancing the budget anyway. Maybe this could, I don't know, maybe help Congress return to some sort of fiscal discipline. I'm being optimistic.
I think so. Look, that's ultimately the hope, and that's why we need politicians in there that stand for something and that care about the long-term prospects of the country. But you're correct. We absolutely have to balance the budget, but we're seeing play out in front of us now what a tough task that is. Debt service payments at the moment are already too high to really balance the budget without major cuts, which of course are proving difficult to find. Like I said, in absence of that, gold becomes important, because if we continue to see a reduced global demand for the dollar, this leads to higher borrowing costs and ultimately more inflationary pressures in the US. And as I said, it puts wind behind the sails of BRICS and puts our primary non-kinetic weapon at risk as well. So I can't overstate the importance of balancing the budget and doing it now.
It's amazing. You hit on something very important. We're approaching $1 trillion just the debt service, just paying people the interest rates that we've borrowed money from China and various other countries. And when it becomes that big of the budget item, you definitely want to figure out a way to stop borrowing money, and they can't seem to do it. And what that means, folks, is every ounce, every dollar you put into gold will be more valuable down the road. So what's the solution? We can't force other countries to stay on a dollar standard.
We can't force them, right? We can't use sticks, and that's where I think carrots become more important. We have to incentivize the world to use the dollar again, and we need to do that through stabilizing its declining value, and I think ultimately, at least short to medium term, ending the use of the dollar as a weapon, right? Now, this can be done, but it's very challenging from the position we're in. Like I said, debt service payments, national debt, and many other things. The rest of the world is not waiting for us to take those steps. They have been replacing US dollars with gold, right? US dollar holdings by central banks are at 30-year lows. Central banks for the last 3 years have been setting consecutive records for gold buying year on year on year. So look, we're going to need to go and vote for politicians, which we have, that understand the issues. We're going to have to hope and pray that they can pull it off. But if they cannot, we need to do what central banks around the world are doing, and that is hedging our retirements and making sure that we have some gold in there, so that if we cannot pull it off and dollars continue to fall in value, our gold will grow, just as yours on the table has, and mitigate those losses.
It's amazing. You're hitting the nail on the head. Central banks, the smartest people on the planet, are buying gold instead of holding U.S. dollars or even, frankly, their own currencies. It's a fascinating concept. We have so much more to talk to you about on this. Philip, we're going to see you in just a bit. We got more of this Real America's Voice special BRICS 2025, The Real Reset show, special just for you. We have a lot more. We'll be back in just a minute.
We'll be right back with more Rio Reset right here on Real America's Voice. Welcome back to the Rio Reset, brought to you by the Birch Gold Group, right here on Real America's Voice.
Welcome back to this Real America's Voice special. I'm Eric Bowling. Today, we're discussing BRICS, their upcoming Rio Reset, and its impact on our financial futures. Central banks worldwide have been preparing for this disruption by buying gold bullion, and some savvy American investors are doing the same. We reached out to talk to a few of them about it.
We had retired actually before we made any investments in gold. We had a portfolio that was fairly well, established and diversified, but the one area that we really hadn't done much in is in regards to precious metals. We started to do a little bit more research and ultimately came across Birch Gold and decided in 2022 to make our first investment.
I'm about 3 to 5 years out of retirement, and I was checking out, obviously, if I'm going to retire sooner or not. And of course, I go through a work-sponsored 401k. Then I kind of looked at it and said, it's not going exactly how I planned. So, with the economy and stuff, so that I started looking at precious metals.
I sometimes refer to the stock market as monopoly money because, it grows one day and next day it's not worth the same amount.
As you look at what's been happening, at a macroeconomic level, you see, a significant amount of increase in our national debt. We then started to see naturally the BRICS nations looking to potentially move to a new basket of currencies. And given all that turmoil in terms of the traditional value of the dollar, we really felt that gold would provide us with a great hedge. One of the things that we liked about Birch Gold is the fact that you had options in terms of how you were going to acquire precious metals as an asset. The fact that you could access gold and hold it physically, or go through the process of moving it into a retirement-like account, with all the various tax benefits associated with that. That was certainly one of the nice options in working with Birch.
Come to the conclusion that, gold's been around forever. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere. You kind of look at it throughout life as what you're doing, and gold's always been there. And I did some research and decided Birch Gold and a couple other ones. They were very informative and they were the most responsive. So when they were ready to go to, pull the trigger on something, they were there to take care of me.
Since establishing our relationship back in 2022, we've had the opportunity to work with the same people over that time span. It's familiar names, familiar faces, and that also provides you with a level of comfort in terms of working with the organization.
I'm a Real American Voices fan. I love all the programming, but I especially like Steve Bannon's show. He has a reputation of being a straight shooter. He's got integrity. When he started talking about Birch Gold and started talking about the 6 books that he's helped publish with them, I was like, wow, this is something I need to take a look at.
They made the process very seamless, and I was really kind of impressed on how well and how easy it was to get it done. I had a very pleasant experience with them, and I'm quite amazed how well it went and how easy it went. So I would definitely recommend Birch Gold.
I have never had such a good process with friendliness, knowledgeable, making sure that all my questions were answered. It just was very smooth. I've never been treated this well on a financial transaction. I did it. I used Birch Gold. It was amazing. It made the process very, very easy.
We've been very high on Birch Gold, and we've certainly recommended Birch Gold to our friends and family members.
You need to do it. There's no doubt in my mind that Birch Gold is the company that you need to invest with precious metals, because they do it right.
And joining me now is one of the Birch customers you just saw, Dennis. Dennis, welcome.
Thanks, Eric.
So really good to have you. Just tell us how you got involved. What was your first reason for buying gold, and specifically with Birch?
Yeah, well, our portfolio had been fairly well diversified, at the time of our retirement. But, my wife actually had been kind of pushing me to look at gold even before we decided to retire. So, as we saw things happening economically and particularly the inflationary pressures that we saw certainly over the last 4 years, and obviously the increase in debt, it became obvious to us that we needed to even think about further diversifying our portfolio. So the only thing we really hadn't looked at in terms of our financial picture was precious metals, and so naturally we then made the decision to start doing some homework, and through that investigative activity, we ultimately came across Birch Gold.
Fantastic. And you happen to be one of the extremely lucky ones. In the last few years, gold has outpaced every single investment on the street. I mean, it doesn't even come close. I mean, the returns are insane. I talked earlier about this first ounce of gold I ever purchased, $382. That was quite a while ago, but it always outpaced the other investments. Here's a question of how simple it is to buy gold through Birch Gold. You pick up the phone, you put in the order. A couple of days later, for me, I buy the coins and the gold bars, right? So it's not in an IRA. I actually want the physical gold. A couple of days later, a delivery comes, you sign for it, and you have your physical gold. You stick it in a safety deposit box. Don't bury it in your backyard. Someone might find it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's exactly like you say. It is. It really is that simple. So, after we had ultimately made the decision as to, the fact that we were going to use Birch Gold, and we then made the determination as to how we were going to move forward, vis-a-vis, IRA, 401k type plan, or hold it physically, as you did. It really was just a matter of a phone call. We got connected with, an advisor at Birch Gold, and since then, in our case, we've had the opportunity to work with the same individual for the last several years, and the same folks in their customer service group. So, that familiarity has made it, very easy for us not only to have made that initial purchase, but also to be repeat customers. And the beauty of this, like you mentioned, is that, of course, when we bought gold initially, we really bought it as a hedge, based upon what was happening at a macroeconomic level. But who knew that gold was going to be this high-performing asset over the last several years? In fact, even outpacing the S&P 500. So it's really been, a blessing in disguise in many respects. That obviously we did this initially just to further diversify ourselves, but it's turned out to be one of the best performing assets in our portfolio over the course of these last few years. So we've really been very fortunate in that respect as well.
Yeah, and the amazing part, Dennis, is when you pick up an ounce of gold, you feel it. I mean, by the way, you don't have to buy a full ounce. I mean, you can buy a quarter ounce, a third of an ounce.
Sure.
The coins come this way. The bars, you just feel the value. It's not paper like paper money, and that really is the difference. Dennis, congratulations and on the great investment. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate being here.
All right, folks. Learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned tax savings, into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting the word America to 989898 right now. Plus, for a limited time, when you text America to 989898, you can get Birch Gold's exclusive Rio Reset fact sheet with an A+ rating, with a Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers. Let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no obligation info kit and a Rio Reset fact sheet before the July summit happens. Text America to 989898 today. After the break, we'll take a closer look at the evidence behind the Rio Reset.
We'll be right back with more Rio Reset right here on Real America's Voice. to the Rio Reset, brought to you by the Birch Gold Group, right here on Real America's Voice.
Hello and welcome to this Real America's Voice special event, BRICS 2025, the Rio Reset. I'm Eric Bowling. Welcome. Come and spend the next half hour with me, and you may walk away smarter and potentially richer too. So the question many of you are asking yourselves right now is, what is that Rio Reset we're talking about, and why should I care about it? Well, we've got answers for you. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates make up BRICS. They formed an alliance that emphasizes cooperation among developing nations with the goal of making the global economy better for them and worse for the United States. BRICS represents more than half of the global population, nearly half of global GDP and manufacturing capacity. BRICS is holding their 2025 summit July 6th and 7th in Rio, the culmination of over a decade of work, building institutions and infrastructure, signing treaties, and laying cables, essentially creating an alternate financial system, a game changer on many levels. BRICS are poised to redraw the global economic map and render the Western-led financial system at a stroke of the pen. This year, 44 countries are lining up to join BRICS, and the momentum is growing. 23 nations have filed formal applications, and another 21 have made their intentions crystal clear. They want in. So this event isn't just a collection of bureaucrats and a photo op. It has the potential to be historic. We may be witnessing a massive transformation, geopolitical and economic global realignment. We're uncovering the backstory behind this dramatic shift and how it will change our lives. Join us now with more insight into BRICS 2025 and the Rio Reset. I'm joined once again by Philip Patrick, in-house economist at Steve Bannon's War Room and precious metals specialist from Birch Gold Group. Welcome back, Patrick. We have artificial intelligence, we have robots, we have cryptocurrency. I'm sure we get asked this a lot. Explain for the audience why gold still matters to the global financial system.
Gold is money. It is trusted. It has been used for centuries as money, right? And it's very good for that because it's finite, it's portable, it's it can't degrade. So there's certain properties that gold has that has made it very valuable as money. And central banks around the world have used it for centuries as such. Even in an era of fiat currencies, central banks around the world use gold to shore up reserves. Its position in the world is increasing, and it's being highlighted with everything we're seeing with BRICS, right? They're de-dollarizing. They don't have a better currency than the dollar, right? It's the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry, and they're using gold as money as a means to de-dollarize. That's its position, and it's irreplaceable in that respect.
Are they trying to develop, like the European Union developed a currency, are they trying to develop a BRICS currency that would, in essence, compete with the dollar?
Look, I think that's the longer-term plan. They have a currency being touted called the unit. It's not really gathering steam. Ultimately, I don't think they really need a currency. Like I said, for the moment, gold is the BRICS currency. Gold last year became the number 2 global reserve asset in the world. It overtook the euro, and it was a function of central banks around the world selling their US dollars and buying gold. So, I think a currency will emerge. I don't think that the US loses global reserve currency over the next year or two because there isn't a natural suitor to overtake. My concern is this is the beginning of the process. As I mentioned earlier, the more international transactions that happen outside of the dollar ultimately weakens the dollar's value longer term. It weakens the argument for the dollar as global reserve. And I think shorter term, we move into a multipolar world, different currencies being used to transact until something emerges that ultimately will take that status officially from the dollar. But gold is the currency of the BRICS for now.
With our national debt pushing towards $40 trillion, this is the reason why the dollar continues to slide. The value continues to slide because of the current the inflation rate and these policies our government continues to employ of overspending. When the dollar goes down, it takes more of those dollars to buy a single ounce of one of these gold coins. That's why it goes up. So this alone, if the BRICS and the Rio reset happens and they do take the dollar as a reserve currency globally off, that dollar value is going to slide. And what happens to gold?
It shoots up, and you summarized it absolutely perfectly. People have to understand this. The more currency we throw into the system, it devalues every single dollar bill that's in existence. If it didn't, countries could just become wealthier and wealthier and wealthier by printing more and more money. But it doesn't work like that. And this is the idea with gold. Gold is constant. Gold's buying power always maintains. You could go back to biblical times. 1 ounce of gold would buy 400 loaves of bread. It does the same thing today. So you summarized it perfectly. As dollars become weaker, we need more weaker dollars to buy gold, hence that inverse relationship. And in an era of money printing, of debt, the dollar will become weaker, and that's exactly why gold's going up. I saw the Dennis, the customer, earlier saying, look, I didn't buy gold as a growth asset, but it was one. And that's the idea. This century, really since the turn of the century, gold has outperformed almost every other asset class, and it coincides with this huge increase in the money supply. Put that into the context of what we've done in the last 4, 8, 12 years respectively. It tells you why gold's growing and why gold's going to continue to grow.
Philip, very importantly, a lot of people ask me this. So I buy gold, I buy physical gold, I hold it. A lot of people want to buy gold, and as Dennis wanted to, as a hedge for all the things that are going on. They want to buy it in an IRA, in some form of other investment. But the concern is, if I buy it that way, Philip, from Birch Gold, will I actually have physical gold, or are they just selling me a piece of paper with almost like a promissory note for actual gold?
Great question. We only deal with physical precious metals that a customer owns, that they control. It is not leveraged, no matter what. The difference is this. When somebody buys with cash, they've paid tax on that money. We can ship them the physical product, they can hold on to it. With an IRA, it's either a tax-deferred or a tax-efficient account. So if we ship them the gold, it's the same thing as pulling money out of an IRA and taking it in your bank account. It's a taxable event. So the way that the IRA works, initially, we have to house the physical gold in a third-party depository. When it's held there, it's held by Brinks or an equivalent. It's fully insured at all times, and it's held in the customer's name. It cannot be lent, pledged, or encumbered, and there's no counterparty risk. So essentially, Brinks hold the metals fully insured. The customer owns them. They own every single ounce in there. If Brinks go out of business, if we do, doesn't affect anything. The customer owns the precious metals. If the customer ever wants possession of them, they can gain that anytime. So when it comes to liquidating out of an IRA, they can either sell the metal and pull cash out, or they can take what they call an in-kind distribution and take possession of the physical asset. Doing that would be a taxable event because they're taking money out of the IRA, but they have the option. So the broad point here, these are physical metals, whether it's inside or outside of an IRA just requires third-party storage initially to maintain the tax efficiency, but it has all the benefits of physical, all of them.
Perfect answer. Philip Patrick, stand by. We'll have you answering some viewer questions right after this break. Stay with us.
We'll be right back with more Rio Reset right here on Real America's Voice. Welcome back to the Rio Reset, brought to you by the Birch Gold Group, right here on Real America's Voice.
Welcome back to this Real America's Voice special, BRICS 2025, the Rio Reset. I'm Eric Bolling. We're talking about how to best position yourself to thrive in these turbulent financial times. We're here with Philip Patrick, in-house economist at Steve Bannon's War Room and precious metals specialist at Birch Gold Group. Philip, let's take some questions from our group of audience members. Here's a good one. What financial advice are you giving your own family?
That's a great question. Look, broadly speaking, it's no surprise, but I'm telling them that they have to be cautious, right? And they have to hedge their exposure. I tell my own family what I tell anybody, and that is that you don't put all of your eggs in any one basket, but we have to protect ourselves in this climate, right? We're all hoping that the administration can pull this off, that they can close the gap and we can maintain control, but we have to hedge ourselves in case that doesn't happen. So I'd give my family the same advice that I give our customers, and that is you've got to find a comfort level, right? And you've got to take a comfortable step to hedge yourself. We have insurance for everything in our lives: car insurance, home insurance, health insurance, and I think we need an element of portfolio insurance. And I think in a climate where options are broadly lacking, we have inflation eroding the buying power of cash, we have broad volatility across the world, precious metals offer a life raft or a hedge to those in need. And I would say structuring a hedge, we hope we never have to use it, just like health insurance, but we sleep better knowing it's there. And I think everyone needs to take that step, be preemptive. We've got a lot of problems on the horizon, and just make sure that you have an element of your portfolio that can thrive during tough times.
How about another viewer question? This viewer says, how much of my savings, this is a great question, how much of my savings should go into gold?
That's a really good question. And it's a tough one to answer, because ultimately everybody's sort of situation is different. Everybody's appetite for risk is different. So it's an individual decision, I think, based on time horizon, risk tolerance, and the industry that you work in, right? Ultimately, high risk industries maybe want to hedge more. My old boss on Threadneedle Street used to say, and I kind of tie it into what I mentioned earlier, take a chunk of your savings, put it into gold, and hope it goes down, right? Because if you've got the minority of your overall in gold, if that's going down, the lion's share of what you have is increasing. So it's very much an individual decision. We can't tell people a comfortable percentage. What I will say is you gotta sleep better at night, right? So make sure your hedge is sufficient enough to work, right, to mitigate losses elsewhere, but understand that the key here is to get some measure of peace of mind. That's going to be very much an individual thing.
Very good, very good. Another viewer question. The viewer asks, let's say you guys are right about the Rio Reset. If the dollar lost global reserve currency status, how would we know? Would an everyday American family even notice? Ooh, I'm sure you got a good answer for this one.
Yeah, it's also a very good question. Look, like I said before, there's not going to be an official announcement, right? We're not going to wake up one day and across, America's Voice, it says, US dollar global reserve currency status is over. But we would note it, right? And we'd see the symptoms. We'd see gas prices creep up, then they jump up, then they stay there. Right? And it's not just gas, it's groceries. It's things that just cost more, prices creep up and ultimately don't come down. Ultimately, it will become more expensive to do everything, and it'll affect our quality of lives. Look at what happened in Great Britain, right? They lost global reserve currency to the US dollar in 1946 following Bretton Woods, and we've seen essentially the wealth sucked out of that nation. Pound sterling's lost over 90% of its relative buying power in that time period. So the effects can be long-lasting and significant. It'll be gradual, and then it'll escalate. So like I said, I'm hoping and praying we can maintain, but I'm preparing myself in case we can't.
Yeah, that would be a big deal if they do get that thing through. Here's another viewer question, customer question, actually. Are BRICS planning to launch a new currency? Because President Trump said he'd crush any attempt to de-dollarize with 100% tariffs. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but add the Trump promising to anyone who tries to de-dollarize, he will tax them 100%.
Yeah, another great question. We got some smart viewers here. So first of all, we touched on the currency side, as you said. They don't need another currency. They're using gold as a means to de-dollarize. My concern with Trump, look, there's some cracks in the BRICS. They're not a natural alliance, right? China and Russia are not a natural alliance at all. Same with India. India is starting to sort of move away from the BRICS a little bit. What I will say is I don't think it's going to deter the Russia, China, and Irans of this world. We've got to remember what ultimately incentivized the BRICS to de-dollarize. It was sanctions. It was using the dollar as a weapon. It was threats. My concern is that more threats ultimately reinforce the idea that the dollar is a yoke and that nations would be better off not wearing it. Putin's mouthpiece, Dmitry Peskov, in December said something very similar. He said, you know, if America use economic force to compel nations to use the dollar, it's going to further strengthen the trend of nations using their own currencies. Like I said, I think ultimately it's going to be carrots more than sticks that will incentivize. And you've got to remember something else. I go back to what I said at the beginning. These are dictatorships. They're planning 100 years out. You know, they're looking beyond the next election cycle here in the United States. So I'm not sure that the sticks are going to work. I think longer term, we're going to need carrots, and carrots will come in the form of a stable US dollar. So I go back to what we talked about, deficits, right? That's how we stabilize the dollar. We pay down our debt. We stop amassing.
One quick last question, if you don't mind. And by the way, if central banks are doing it, I'm guessing we all should as well. Why are central banks buying gold so aggressively right now?
Listen, by the way, you're correct. I tell customers all the time, like, you can take everything I say with a pinch of salt. That's my opinion, right? Central banks around the world setting records. That means more than anything I have to say. Look, ultimately, they do it for the same reasons we do. It's a hedge against currency inflation, right? Central banks around the world are holding dollars like us. Those dollars are losing value, right? It's also a counter-cyclical asset, meaning that when the economy tanks, generally gold goes up in those climates, so it allows them to stabilize economies. And ultimately, it's a universally accepted money of last resort, right? What I like to say is central banks are the people who print currencies. If they don't trust currencies, why on earth would we, right?
Very, very quickly, it's not just gold, though. With Birch, we can buy silver. We can buy other precious metals.
Oh, absolutely. Silver, I think, is a very good one for this climate, heavily undervalued. We sell a lot of silver, platinum and palladium as well, right? If we can turn the economy around, boost manufacturing, those metals will ultimately thrive longer term. So there's diversification within the asset class of precious metals. I think for what's in front of us, gold and silver are the two most appropriate. But I think as time passes, if we start to get through the mess, platinum and palladium will start to look attractive again. So all four of the big ones.
Indeed. Philip Patrick, thank you so much for your time. Very, very informative.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
All right, folks, learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting the word America to 989898. Plus, for a limited time, when you text America to 989898, you can get Birch Gold's exclusive Rio Reset fact sheet. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation info kit and a Rio Reset fact sheet before the July summit. Text America to 989898. 9898 today. I'd like to thank all of you at home for taking the time to spend your time with us. I hope that the information you learned here today will not only make you aware of the Rio Reset, but what holds the future holds and how we can prepare for it. On behalf of Birch Gold and Real America's Voice, I'm Eric Bolling. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you again next time.